Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's French Open Round 4 catch-up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Rune sets up a showdown with Rude.
Sabalenka seals a meeting with Svitolina.
And we unveil the winner of our Boodles competition.
Kim, today is the 5th of June and we are here to catch up on round 4 of the French Open at Tennis Weekly HQ. We have reached the midway point in Roland Garros. We already have some of our quarterfinalists and we are recording. We are just taking a breather, aren't we, from Suzanne Lenglen today, which has just gone on and on and on. And we've still only had 2 matches complete.
I know, and I am just chuffed that it's Sara Sorribes Tormo that has provided the longest match of the tournament. I mean, who else would it be? She's absolutely lived up to her billing.
Yes, I mean, I'm totally not shocked about that. The one thing I was actually realising whilst this match against Haddad Maia was going on was, you know, there's been all this talk this week around the night session. Do we put a ladies match on the night session? This worry that fans won't get their money's worth with one ladies match. Kim, I've realised what the solution to all these issues are. Stick Sara Sorribes Tormo on there. Give her the evening slot.
Yeah, she'll definitely give the punters their money worth. I mean, point per penny, it's probably the best rate you're going to get, I think.
I mean, that's the key statistic, isn't it? That's the key statistic.
But yeah, we'll be dissecting her match a bit later on. There's still some action going on as we record. Iga Swiatek is out on court, but we'll be rounding up today and yesterday's action from the 4th round at Roland Garros. And very excitingly, after our break, we will be revealing the winner of our very exciting competition for the Boodles. So yeah, don't want to miss that.
And actually, less excitingly, we've got a collector set update for everyone who took part, including ourselves, which let's not spoil it for now, but it's been a bit of a shocker, hasn't it, from everyone involved.
Yeah, but there's still a few players that could make or break, but it definitely isn't one of the strongest showings from everyone.
We very nearly had, if Rune had lost today, we had all our collector set player picks go out by the midway point.
Yeah, it's
the less said, the better.
Shocking. Maybe players will have to try and get us not to pick them. It might be a curse of collector set.
Oh yes, the collector set curse. Oh, is that a thing?
Oh, could be.
It is. Maybe we've started it here at the French Open.
Well, one player that is still in is Holger Rune. He did have to battle through in 5 sets in a last set tiebreak up against Francisco Cerundolo today. But he lives to fight another day. He is into the quarterfinal. I mean, Cerundolo is one of those sort of stalwart players, I suppose, that can be quite tricky to play against. And I mean, at one point I was thinking, oh, this is just, collector set all over. But I guess, it was a long match, 5 sets. But to be honest with you, it's kind of being overshadowed a bit by a very sort of controversial point in the match, which, needs a lot of re-looking at, I think, to see how you want to, which side you want to fall on, perhaps. Yeah,
because this point happened right in the middle of the match in the 3rd set, really pivotal moment in the context of the match. And it was 1-2 deuce. And there was the point went against Cerundolo in the end, but he had called that there was a double bounce on the other side of the net by Rune. The ball had gone up in the air. Cerundolo was at the net, and the umpire, I'm still a little bit confused, but I think he called a let because he didn't see the double bounce, and then a ball kid started to go onto the court, so he called a let. But then I think he called a hindrance because I think Cerundolo had asked the umpire to say that was a double bounce whilst he thought the play was going on. And it was just all this confusion at a really big moment, and it ended up being the point to Rune when arguably it should have been Cerundolo's. Yeah, looking back at it, I did think it was a double bounce, and I did think that Rune could, probably have seen that. But I guess, you're going to play on until someone says otherwise. Perhaps that's not the most sporting thing to do, but maybe genuinely he didn't see it. It's easy to,
people make mistakes. It's easy enough. And Cerundolo, by verbally kind of interjecting, the umpire's given him the hindrance and he's lost the point, which is pretty frustrating for Cerundolo. I mean, it was quite early on in that third set, but he did go and lose that set, but, managed to clinch the fourth and take it into, deep into a fifth. So I don't think it necessarily, maybe didn't change the outcome of the whole match, but I mean, maybe it did throw Cerundolo off a little bit.
He looked so distracted and despondent in the kind of the immediate aftermath. I mean, he was broken. He did manage to break back, but it just sort of reminded me that I think like umpires certainly, I think over the last few months on the tour have been under a real inspection. We spoke about kind of Leani, I think, a month ago on the pod and his kind of theatrics, and particularly when we've come into the clay season, looking at marks on the court and not getting that right. And when we come to double bounce situations, I feel like there's just a very easy solution in terms of get the video review on the tablets or the monitors that the umpires have access to. It feels like a no-brainer, and I just hate seeing these moments happen that kind of interrupt the flow of the match. And you could argue, yes, but it's up to Cerundolo to kind of not let this distract them, and that's part of the game. But I just think that we need technology implemented in beyond just Hawkeye outside of the clay courts, but that is coming in soon, to just clear up these calls and get on with it.
Yeah, we need some sort of VAR for these issues. And you could also do that with, balls going into the crowd, whether things are intentional or not. And, that will, we'll get onto that a bit later as well. But yeah, I certainly think, most other sports nowadays do have that facility. And it does seem like tennis is lacking when we don't.
I think it would be great, I think, from like a fan point of view, actually, if it was like a VAR check, get the players to do the little signal to the umpire on the court. I think, the fans would love to see that. They would engage with that. And I think it would just add a little bit more interaction there as opposed to confusion, which is, I think, what we ended up with at this point in the match.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, because I think a lot of the fans are just a bit bemused and, they didn't maybe see it exactly, or they're not obviously up as so close. So they benefit from being able to rewatch it, wouldn't they?
From your point of view, I mean, you spoke about whether Rune was aware of the double bounce or not, or even if it is his own responsibility, is that up to the umpires? What's your take on double bounces, and is that the player's responsibility, or do you think that should be just left to the umpire?
I think it's fair and sporting for the player to, openly admit it. But I suppose if there's nothing in the rules that says you have to admit then, I mean, dog eats dog, you want to just win by any means, don't you? So, but I don't think it is really in the spirit of the game to have a clear double bounce and not say anything when it's, as clear as mud sometimes. So if it was me, I would own up because I'd feel very guilty afterwards, but not everyone is going to have the same moral standards maybe, or perspective. But I mean, that was, a bit of drama in that match, and it did go down to the wire, but Holger Rune coming through in the end. He will be up against a fellow Scandinavian in Casper Ruud, who is back into the quarterfinals of Roland Garros, and he had a bit more of a straightforward win. It was straight sets, but, quite close score lines, and that was against Nicolas Jarry of Chile, who they'd only played not so long ago in Geneva, where Jarry had won. So Casper Ruud was able to reverse that. It could have been a bit of a bogey match, perhaps, having just lost to him a few weeks back. Not even that, but yeah, he managed to get the better of him in the end.
I had this match on upset alert because Nicolas Jarry has been in great form. He showed that, I think, particularly on the clay in South America. Granted, European clay is a little bit of a different proposition, but Casper Ruud did very well, I think. It was a really tough, competitive match, straight from the off. There were no kind of gimme sets like there were in the Rune Cerundolo match, where it was a little bit more kind of topsy-turvy. Ruud really, I think, had to keep his concentration on from point one. And, it was so impressive to see him, I think, mix it up. I liked him using the drop shots, bringing Jarry into the net. And I think he served particularly well as well. And although I was, looking forward to that kind of quarterfinal with Rune versus Ruud and thinking, given the recent form of both of them, you would have thought Holger Rune goes in as as a slight favourite there. But, with this result, I think, and also, his previous at the French Open, Casper Ruud's going to be very high, I think, on confidence against an opponent who might be a little bit tired and might be a little bit injured, actually, because towards the end of his match against Cerundolo, there was a little bit of physical fatigue settling in.
Yeah, I think Ruud sort of flew under the radar coming in because he hadn't had a very good start to the year. We didn't think he was going to repeat his heroics of last year. But actually, yeah, he's a lot fresher. He seems to have played himself into some form. Really good stats in this match today and mixing it up nicely. And I think, yeah, like you said, Rune is probably going to be physically a bit worse for wear. I know he's, they're both young, aren't they? Rune especially. But yeah, I think it could go deep again, Ruud.
I know that obviously they have had that previous situation in the dressing room, the moment, that I think has been put to bed. But certainly I think when the stakes are going to be on in a quarterfinal, I'd love to know what Casper Ruud would make of a double bounce that happens that when Rune plays on, because although they're both from, I feel, the same part of the world, arguably their approach, I think, to maybe sportsmanship is a little bit different because, for Rune, it's like, I'm going to leave it up to the umpire. But I think Casper Ruud is certainly in that Carlos Alcaraz, Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer territory of I'll be the honest man and I'll be the honest man with every point. So I think there's going to be quite a contrast there. And in this environment, I think it could get quite spicy again, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think, Joel, you'd probably quite like a bit of spice, wouldn't you? But let's see what other matches we've got in that section of the draw. We do have Dimitrov and Sasha Zverev. They are about to step onto court as we're recording this. So that is still to happen. And we've also still got Yoshito Nishioka and Thomas Martin Etcheverry. It's a bit of a mouthful. They're still waiting for Swiatek to finish, and she's only just started. So yeah, long day out on long court. But it's only getting your money's worth if you had a long ticket today. So who are you going for those matches? Famous last words, Joel.
I'm gonna say, for some reason, I'm just gonna say Dimitrov. And I'm going to say Dimitrov and Nishioka. I think it's going to be a bad day for the South Americans. So, I'm arguably going for the underdogs in both of those matches. But I am really fascinated to see how Zverev-Dimitrov gets on in the night session because, Dimitrov, another player who's just sort of been, I think, flying under the radar. No one's really expected much from him. Got to the second week for the first time in quite a while at a Grand Slam. And Zverev, arguably another player who probably there was not as much expectation on him given what we've seen of late on the tour. So they will feel like this is their moment, a big opportunity really to get to a semi-final at the very least. And Etcheverry and Nishioka will be thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love how Dimitrov does just throw in kind of a run at a slam, here, there and everywhere.
It's just so random, isn't it? It's like it could come out at any moment, but I absolutely love it when it does.
Yeah, just as we're starting to forget him, he's like, hang on, I am still here. I can still do this, which is nice. I've always, been quite a fan of Dimitrov. He's a nice bloke. So, wish him well in that match. But let's look at the women's side because we do have a quarterfinal set up between Beatriz, Haddad, Maia and Ons Jabeur. We've also got Coco Gauff waiting for the winner of Swiatek and Serenko. Slightly different manner of victory for Haddad Maia and Jabeur earlier. Obviously, Haddad Maia went almost 4 hours to beat Sara Sorribes Tormo, whereas Ons Jabeur was through in straight sets. What did you make, though, of Ons Jabeur? Let's talk about Jabeur first. She was up against Bernarda Pera, American player, who has won some clay court titles previously, had beaten Ons Jabeur before. Jabeur came through this one, but it wasn't the greatest tennis in the world, was it?
No, particularly I think on both of them on their serves was not great. I think just Pera struggled on serve the most. She was broken 8 times, converted for just 4 of 12 break points. yeah, that first set was a real, like, who can hold serve wins the set. And certainly for Jabeur, going deeper into the competition, she's going to need to certainly up those percentages on her first and second serves, because it just wasn't pretty at times. And I get that, at the French Open on the stadium courts, there is issues with wind and dealing with the elements, but you're going to need to be able to get the fundamentals right. And I think maybe your ball was a little bit lucky that Perra was having seemingly an off day that wasn't able to capitalize on your ball's struggles. So, there's, I think, plenty of work to be done there. And I think that's certainly a shot I'm going to be looking at in her quarter-final match against Haddad Maia, because I think Haddad Maia as a returner is one who can make you pay. And, if your ball's serve is not on song, I could quite easily see Haddad Maia making further history at the French Open.
Yeah, she has become the first Brazilian into the French Open quarterfinals since 1968. So it's been a long time of asking. And definitely, I think she's got the potential to go further, especially if Jabeur is struggling on serve. But yeah, Haddad Maia's match today against SST, or Sara Sorribes Tormo, 3 hours, 51 minutes, longest match on the WTA Tour this year.
Longer than Swiatek on court in total up to round 4 at the French Open, which to me is the most mind-blowing stat I've heard over the last week or so.
Yeah, I think Swiatek before today, she was on 3 hours 31, something like that, for her 3 matches. And yeah, this match alone has exceeded that. I mean, it's just crazy. And I mean, 10 of the games went to at least one deuce. I think 79 rallies went 9 shots or more. There's some great stats people are pulling out of the match.
It was a war of attrition just watching it, I think. But yeah, Haddad Maia she's a great competitor. She's a fierce competitor, very much like Sara Sorribes Tormo, and you never get a free point. And again, it didn't feel like the serve. There were no quick games. The serve was not doing a lot again in this match, but probably but more on kind of different reasons. Not necessarily it not going in, but just, again, these players just love to get into a baseline rally. They're going to play with a lot of margin on their shots. But Haddad Maia, I think, is the one she is a little bit more fearless in those moments where she's not just going to put it back in play. She's going to go for she's going to go for her shots. And there were times towards the end of that match where they didn't necessarily come off, and you could see that you could see the nerves after how much effort and time that had been put in on the court. You could see that really kind of affecting some of her, I would say, quite rudimentary kind of ground strokes. But yeah, she was able to get it done in the end. And I think just having that sort of aggressive mindset, you just need that against Sara Sorribes Tormo. The ball is coming back. It's going to come back with that kind of loopy, heavy topspin. You just need to hit through it. And in the end, Haddad Maia was able to do that.
So do you think Haddad Maia, who are you going for, Haddad Maia or Jabeur? Do you think Haddad Maia is going to be knackered after today? Or do you think she's just that sort of attritional quality is just going to outlast Jabeur?
I think we're going to have first of all, we're going to have a great matchup. I think, they are both, they're both great friends, I think, off the court, play with the right spirit. I think Haddad Maia is going to have a bit of a crowd there. And I think Jabeur, the entertainer that she is also going to have the support. So I think it's going to be a fascinating battle. I think as much as I love Haddad Maia, and I still could see her springing an upset, but I give the slight edge to Jabeur given, how far she's gone in this tournament before. That's a big contrast, I think, with Haddad Maia, given, this is the first time I think she's gone beyond, round 2 at a Grand Slam. And I think the experience might show in that quarterfinal. Jabeur, obviously 2 Grand Slam finals last year. I think she knows what it takes. And I think she has been, from what I've seen of both of them, I feel like she has also been played. I've seen the better tennis from her over the last week or so. So, I'm going to stick with Jabeur, but I wouldn't be surprised if she gets pushed all the way.
And just going back to Sara Sorribes Tormo, she was involved in a bit of a controversy in the doubles, which she's still in the doubles with her partner Marie Buskova, but they were up against a team from Japan. It was Kato and Sudi Jadi, and there was a default. because Kato had hit a ball girl with a ball that she'd sent cross court. The ball girl was upset by it. The umpire originally gave Kato just a warning, but then Bouzkova and Sorribes Tormo sort of piped up and said, hang on, she's hit a ball girl there. That's not allowed. She should be disqualified, which she was. The decision was changed, and Kato and Sutijadi was, they were disqualified. So what do you make of that? Because originally the umpire had obviously made one decision, and then the players protesting has changed that decision. Do you think that was the right call? Do you think the umpire should have stuck with their gut instinct? Or do you think, if you're hitting a ball kid, even if it wasn't intentional, which I don't think it was by Kato, you think that is it?
You've got to accept the consequences.
Yeah, the rule is a rule.
It's a really tough one. And I think the rules at the moment are very black and white. And for me, looking at this situation on video, I don't think it was a default. Maybe at most it warranted a warning, but to think like a player is going to lose their prize money for, from what I see, a non-aggressive hit across the net to help to put the ball onto the other side of the net where those players are serving, I don't think there was anything intentional about it. And to me, if it's not intentional, I don't agree that a default can be given. I just don't think it's fair. I think the challenge is that regardless of intent or not, the ball girl I think was crying on the court, and I think that's what Sorribes Tormo told the umpire, and I think that's why they had a second look at it. But I think for me, my gut feeling was it wasn't a default. Yeah,
I think I agree with you in the sense that it was clearly she was just trying to help the ball team out by putting the ball back, and it's going to mean players that are kind of going to be reluctant to do that, I think, aren't they? In case anything might happen, or a gust of wind might suddenly take the ball where it shouldn't be. But I think at the same time, I guess players like Bouzkova and Sorribes Tormo, they know what happened with Novak Djokovic at the US Open. They've seen other instances where people have been defaulted. Are they entitled to kind of argue the point and say, well, hang on a minute, why are you not upholding that rule? I thought this was the rule. It's perhaps not the most sort of sporting or fair to try and get your opponents disqualified when a decision had already been made. But I do kind of see where they were coming from. Maybe if they'd been up, because I think they were 3-1 down in that set. If they'd been 3-1 up, they might have let it slip. But
I mean, it's a knockout competition, and you got to take every advantage you get, and some players will be like that and really take that to the edge. And I think in this moment, Bouzkova and SST did that, and I don't think I think there are other players who wouldn't have taken it that far. But to me, it is fascinating because I do think then the rules need to be looked at, or maybe it needs to be taken on a more case-by-case basis, because I think there needs to be some clarity over intent and what that means, and maybe there needs to be some more education around, well, if you hit a ball towards someone on court that's not a player in that direction, you run the risk. And I watched, Kim, a video of Roger Federer doing something similar, quite a few years ago at the Australian Open, when he sort of was returning a ball to a ball kid in the middle, and I think it hit him on the head. And it was just fascinating how the commentators were saying, "Oh, that would be a prize for the for the ball kid, a souvenir for the ball kid." But I think nowadays you would look back on that and think he would have been lucky not to get defaulted there.
Yeah, I mean, that seems ridiculous now almost that happened in the way it did, because in recent years, my experience is that anyone who hits a ball kid in any sort of capacity is going home. But I guess it depends on that initial reaction by the ball kid, how the umpire interprets
the ball kid was smiling in that instance, and in the instance at the French Open, the ball girl was crying. So again, do those factors come into play and influence decisions? Because that to me was the big influencer in the outcome. But
I don't think a rule should be influenced by something like how a ball kid reacts, because you might start getting, I don't know, ball kids biasing results if they know that that's how it's interpreted. So I think it has to be a blanket rule to kind of make it fair, and it might mean that in some cases something unintentional leads to something, unfortunate, like a disqualification. But yeah, I think there's definitely perhaps needs to be conversations around that. Just before we go to an ad break, Joel, let's quickly touch upon Coco Gauff, because she is also through today after a victory over Schmiedlova. 7-5, 6-2, straight sets for Coco Gauff. She has a really amazing record, actually, against players outside the top 50, Schmiedlova being one of them. Her last 37 matches against players outside the top 50, she has won. So clearly, she's not one to lose to lower ranked opponents of that sort of caliber and rank, which is an impressive, consistent record. I guess she just needs to work on players slightly higher ranked now. But do you think she's got the game to go much further? I mean, given the fact that she's likely to have Iga Swiatek in the next round, do you think she's played her way into sort of challenging in that possible encounter at all?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to know, because I do think Coco Gauff's in this sort of odd situation of, she's good enough to beat, as you said, like players outside the top 50 and even above that. But once you get to the creme de la creme, I still think there's work to be done there. And I don't know how much we can take from, defeating Schmiedlova, in what was, I think, relatively comfortable in the end. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I think she's going to be fired up there. I think, she obviously loves playing in Paris. I think she was speaking earlier about how she's been learning a bit of French. I don't know if that was a way to kind of get the crowd on her side, but I think it's going to be a big step up in competition now. And I think she's going to have to raise her level, even though she showed a pretty solid game today.
Yeah, and actually breaking news, Joel, Swiatek has indeed gone through to the quarterfinals, so Gauff will definitely be playing her. Lesia Tsurenko has unfortunately retired in their encounter, 5-1 down in the first set, so not entirely sure at the moment exactly what the nature of that was.
Tsurenko retirement?
It's a real shame, but it's not the first time we've seen that, is it, Joel, from her? So, we'll see on that. Hopefully she's okay. But let's take a quick break now. We'll be back in the second half, looking back on day 8 and also unveiling our Boodles competition winner, plus giving that very important update on collector set. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. Now we're going to move on to day 8 of Roland Garros. Well, actually, before we get on to day 8, the Boodles competition winner.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's entered the competition. We had a lot of interest, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's such a fantastic opportunity, fantastic prize. But Joel, would you like to do the drum roll and announce our very special winner?
Yes, drum roll, big drum roll. Our first ever Tennis Weekly podcast competition winner of a pair of tickets to the Boodles is Amisha. Amisha, congratulations. You'll be taking Vikesh. We will be reaching out to you by Twitter DM, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, Amisha, congratulations to you. You have got a couple of passes to go see the Boodles. Who knows? Maybe you'll get to meet the Tennis Weekly podcast crew as well. I mean, what a win that would be, right?
Well, we look forward to seeing you at the Boodles, and congrats Amisha and Vikesh. Well done. I hope you're looking forward to experience, and we will be in touch with further details. But thank you to everyone who entered. We hope to bring you some more opportunities in the future. So maybe you'll get lucky on those instead. But let's go on to day 8 at Roland Garros. So back onto the clay. And truth be told, not too many shocks on either the men's and ladies' sides from day 8. Very sort of straightforward matches, a lot of straight sets. Who caught your eye? We had straight sets for Tsitsipas, Alcaraz and Djokovic, and a 4-set win for Khachanov. Anything from those results, Joel, that you particularly struck by?
Yeah, it's tough. I think the only one I could really say I was actually very impressed by was Carlos Alcaraz against Lorenzo Musetti, because in our last pod, Chris actually had that match on upset alert. Musetti hadn't dropped a set going into his match against Alcaraz. He completely dismantled Cam Norrie in the previous round. So I thought that was going to be a lot tougher and tighter than it was. So for Carlos Alcaraz to do that and to play the way he did, lots of drop shots, lots of winners, all the typical eye-catching shot making on display, it just feels like, at the moment anyway, we are getting closer and closer towards Alcaraz Djokovic. However, I will say Stefanos Tsitsipas also looked equally good against Sebastian Offner, the qualifier, later in the day. So that's going to be, for me, that is the pick, I think, for me, of the quarterfinals on the men's side. Tsitsipas, Alcaraz, both coming through in straight sets. They're both going to be fresh. They're both going to be raring to go. And it seems to be, to me, like they're both, near enough the peak of their playing powers at the moment.
Yeah, and that will be quite an interesting one, because Tsitsipas has never actually beaten Alcaraz.
But he's also never lost a quarterfinal at a Grand Slam.
Oh, so which way is the stats going to fall?
How does the mind work with that?
Yeah, I've been quite impressed with Tsitsipas this tournament. He seems quite focused and relaxed, which is a bit of a change to sometimes what we normally see.
His box seemed relaxed. I mean, his dad is out. He's actually been smiling for once. He always seems so serious and so in sort of in the zone that I think it's actually quite nice to see. That dynamic working. It seems to be working well with, Mark Philippoussis not there anymore. Maybe that's just kind of concentrated them that tiny bit more. And Tsitsipas to me has been free flowing. I will say though, Offner qualifier, arguably, that is, quite a, it's going to be quite a step up, I think, from that to them facing Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent point there. It is going to be a difference. And Alcaraz has been playing, very, very well. Another player who's been playing very well is Novak Djokovic. He dismissed Juan Pablo Varillas. So he's got Karen Khachanov next. Djokovic, it's the same scoreline exactly as the Alcaraz match, actually. He's sort of sailed through, hasn't he, without dropping a set. I think we thought he might actually have some teething issues at the start of the tournament, but it's just not been the case. So, I mean, I can't see him losing to Khachanov. They've played so many times, and I don't see Djokovic... I don't see Djokovic really struggling, to be quite honest with you.
Kim, I just wanted to raise with you a record that has happened because of that victory and Djokovic being in the quarterfinals, which, again, just sort of blew my mind. Maybe it will blow our listeners' minds as well. Novak Djokovic has now reached more Roland Garros quarterfinals than Rafael Nadal.
That is... very interesting, Joel.
Well, hang on. It gets stranger. Nadal has more Australian Open quarterfinals than Novak Djokovic. What's going on here?
What is going on? I suppose they do well at the other person's, slam territory, but they don't go as far. So Rafa must have more semi-finals and finals, obviously, and the other way around, I guess. That is quite an interesting stat, yeah. Excellent. Well, Djokovic is into yet another quarterfinal and seemingly, going to be progressing further. I still stand by that the winner of the tournament is probably going to, come from Djokovic versus Alcaraz in the semi-final, unless Tsitsipas, can stick his oar in and upset the apple cart. Going over to the women's side, though, perhaps a bit more up for grabs. Bottom half of the draw, the quarterfinals are set. We've got Aryna Sabalenka against Elina Svitolina, and we've got Karolina Muchova against Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova. So two very interesting encounters, actually. Sabalenka coming through against Sloane Stephens, one of Chris's favourites.
Night session.
7-6, 6-4 in the night session. Yeah, first women's match to grace the night session on Sunday. What did you make of this one? It's a bit topsy-turvy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, where to begin? I think Sabalenka was, started really well, started really aggressive, was overpowering Sloane Stephens, raced into, I think she raced into like a 5-love lead, and you thought, oh, this match might not even last an hour. And then all of a sudden, something switched, and I felt that Sabalenka was almost trying to rush things in my opinion. I thought she was trying to get it done almost too quickly, and as a result, she was just spraying lots and lots of errors about the court. There were still a few kind of winners in there, but so she really did let Sloane Stephens come back into the match and really make a thing of it in that first set, when from 5-love up, that really shouldn't have been on the cards. I think the disappointment from Sloane Stephens' point of view is that, you know, she had put in so much effort to come back into that first set. To get it to a tiebreak from 5-love down was, you know, mightily impressive, but just not to kick on and take that first set, I think it would have been a very interesting question asked of Sabalenka's mentality, you know, having been in that position and have lost, you know, going into that second set. But that didn't come to fruition, and it was very topsy-turvy, as you said, and I just don't think, you know, Sabalenka can afford to have those lapses in these matches, and, you know, rely on, you know, their opponent not necessarily getting the job done, like Sloane Stephens just came up short. But bit of a strange one, I think, for Sabalenka.
Yeah, and she will have a player in the next round who's very relaxed and just kind of proceeding through the draw. Elina Svitolina, obviously coming back from being out, you know, having had her first child. She's back. This is just her 5th event since coming back from maternity leave. She beat Daria Kasatkina in straight sets. I don't think we'd ever put Svitolina into the quarterfinals. I know she obviously won in Strasbourg just before the tournament, but, you know, that's different to kind of going straight back into Grand Slam mode. But she just said she's not getting feeling any pressure. She feels like she's 17 again, coming onto the tour fresh.
I feel like she was feeling pressure towards the end of that match against Kasatkina, because she definitely had. I mean, she served for it. Did she serve for it twice? She definitely served for it once and was broken. So I do think there's still. I know she's been in Grand Slam quarterfinals before. She's been in Grand Slam semi-finals before, but. I do think there was still a little bit of nerves and a little bit of tension there that was sort of inhibiting her from getting it over the line. But again, just kind of sticking with it in that tiebreak and putting those moments out of your mind, that was impressive from her, because Kasatkina wasn't really giving much away. She was, again, asking, I think, the questions of Svitolina in that tiebreak. Like, if you're going to win this match, you're going to go and have to hit some winners and hit through me, which in the end she did. But it was impressive, but it was certainly a fight towards the end. Yeah,
and also at the end of the match, you know, Daria Kasatkina, knowing full well that I guess Svitolina wasn't going to shake her hand because of, you know, the nationality, she just went straight to the umpire, but the crowd did not enjoy that. And similar to the whole Marta Kostyuk thing, you know, last week, similar thing, the crowd booing Kasatkina, who, you know, she said that she was just being respectful because of her opponent's position, you know, not to shake her hand. And yet the crowd seemed to have kind of misunderstood what was actually going on, which is just, again, a shame that it had to end that way.
Yeah, I mean, she wrote on Twitter today, Kasatkina, leaving Paris with a very bitter feeling. All this days, after every match I've played in Paris, I always appreciate and thanked crowd for support and being there for the players, but yesterday I was booed for just being respectful on my opponent's position, not to shake hands. So I don't want to get into it every single episode, but I feel like we've spoken about the French crowd being very hostile to every single player, regardless of their circumstances, and I think this was particularly upsetting, particularly for Kasatkina, because she's a player who's spoken out against the Russian regime. You know, she's come out, you know, I think she had actually kind of activists in her box as well. She really is one of the few players, if not the only player, to really be anti-Russian in her stance and be kind of forthcoming with that. So yeah, I don't think it was nice to kind of hear those boos, and I quite liked, you know, she did give a thumbs up to Svitolina, and I think, to me, I liked, actually, she took initiative and went to the umpire as opposed to going to the net, so we didn't have this sort of awkward I'm not going to shake your hand, you're not going to shake my hand, let's move on. So I quite liked how that was her kind of strategy at the end of the match. So to me, it was like she had thought about it, and yeah, it was. I think it was unfair that the crowd had reacted in that way.
Yeah, I think that was a bit unfair, and it is a bit of a shame that they're not sort of costing on to the context a bit more, and maybe it is because you do get some more casual tennis fans going to, for a day out at the tennis like you do at Wimbledon. Who knows?
I feel like you're not going to need to know too much context for the next match, because Svitolina versus Sabalenka. I mean, is it fair to say that's going to be the most? It could be the most. I mean, I'm sounding like a tabloid headline here, but like
you are.
that to me is like the most. I know that to me could be kind of the most politically charged match maybe since the war has started. We've got Ukraine versus Belarus. Sabalenka still not really wanting to do open press conferences. This is a match to me that could be talked about more so because of context than the match itself. Yeah,
I agree, but I hope the tennis lives up to what I think could be a very good match on the court. So let's hope there's no shindigs. But I mean, we have also Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova up against Karolina Muchova in the other side. Pavlyuchenkova coming across Elise Mertens in 3 sets, and she was a former finalist a couple of years back, lost to Krejcikova, could have won it really, and she's back into her 8th Grand Slam quarterfinal. She's been out for a while with this knee injury, so she's down at 300 odd in the world, so this makes her the lowest ranked Roland Garros quarterfinalist ever, which is pretty cool for her perspective, to kind of have that claim to fame, I suppose. But she should be a lot higher ranked. She should be seeded here, but she's obviously proving that her performance of a couple of years back wasn't a fluke. She's continuing her good form on the clay, but she will have a tough battle against Muchova, because Muchova's also been in really good nick. Obviously beat Sakkari in the first round, and she won in straights over Elina Svitolina yesterday. Very convincing on court in that one, and I think I could see that one going both ways. Muchova Pavlyuchenkova.
I think it's just a shame from Pavlyuchenkova's point of view. Her ranking is so low that she won't get into Wimbledon without a wild card. And it was interesting to hear in her press yesterday around, have you asked Wimbledon for a wild card? And she sort of laughed it off and said, come on, you really think Wimbledon will give me a Russian a wild card? And yeah, I just wanted to ask you that, Kim, around, is that fair enough from Wimbledon? If Pavlyuchenkova submitted an application for a wild card based on her play and based on her good form that she's shown. She's not necessarily had the greatest of record at Wimbledon, which I think probably would count against her. But is that like a straight no? Do you think that's fair? Or do you think that should actually warrant a wild card, regardless of her having Russian citizenship?
I think she deserves a wild card in the sense of, I think her tennis, she's obviously in good form, and she's the sort of player that I guess wild cards are partly designed for, for experienced players who are coming back from injury and need that helping hand. But I do think, in the light of Wimbledon being so harsh and kind of anti-Russian, I think it's going to be potentially controversial for them to give her the wild card. So I do think they're going to refrain from that. But then, if they're allowing Russians and Belarusians to play the tournament, they shouldn't really be excluding them from wild card allocation. No. So it's kind of works both ways, I suppose. But I think she certainly warrants it in terms of her tennis. You know what?
I do as well. I think it's a shame, and I mean, we're also hearing about kind of visa issues at the moment. So with some players, not even Russian players, I think Medvedev being one of them, not receiving their visa yet in order to play the 3rd Grand Slam of the year. So it's definitely still I feel like a thorny issue with still kind of some very, very visible unknowns. And although we had obviously this kind of statement to clarify Wimbledon's stance earlier on in the year, there's still some things that I think that need to be addressed. And to me, at the top of that list is wildcards to Russians and Belarusians potentially. If we're letting them play, then I can't see how you say no to those, to that situation.
Yeah, it's like, don't you sort of going half the way and not, it's a bit hypocritical, isn't it? If not, yeah, I totally get that. So it would be interesting to see what the All England club decide to do if they're even considering her anyway, because they might have a whole cohort of other players, including Brits, that they might need to factor in. But yeah, well done to Pavlyuchenkova for coming this far at the French Open.
British ladies will need all the wild cards they can get, I feel, at the moment, in order to just get into the main draw.
Yeah, and I mean, British players are having not the greatest tournament. I think we've only got Neil Skupski in the men's doubles in the quarterfinal left. The doubles guys haven't done particularly great either.
Food poisoning seems to be a hot topic, because it was Jesse Pegula, and I think Jamie Murray also had to pull out of his his mixed doubles match. He cited food poisoning as well. So I don't know if Jamie Murray was eating the same escargot of Jesse Pegula, but unfortunate way to end the tournament for him.
Yeah, it was not great. Don't eat your snails in Paris going forwards. Oh, couldn't imagine eating a snail. Just the thought of it makes me squeamish. Yep. So but there we go. Let's have a look at what is happening tomorrow. We've got the quarterfinals beginning, of course. We have got that Mukova Pavlyuchenkova match up, and then followed by Svitolina Sabalenka, Djokovic, Khachanov, and then Alcaraz Tsitsipas, the night session, which I think will be hopefully a great match.
What are you thinking? Give me some names. Some names, and in how many sets?
Mukova 3 sets, Sabalenka 3 sets, Djokovic 3 sets, and Alcaraz 4 sets.
Oh, okay.
What about you, Joel?
I'm going to go Pavlyuchenkova in 2.
Ooh.
Svitolina in 3.
Wow.
Djokovic in 4. And Tsitsipas in 5.
We're going very different there then. But before we finish, let's do a quick collect a set update. It's been a bit of a bloodbath. Almost everyone was out by the middle of the tournament, but Rune is still going to mean we're all still in with it, with the charts. There's only one player to get 2 correct picks so far, and that's Tom Bryant. So well done, Tom. You're the only person to guess Jelena Ostapenko correctly going out in the second round.
I don't know how he managed to think that was a thing against, what was it, Peyton Stearns?
Peyton Stearns.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
Very wild. We, out of me, you and Chris, we all got Cam Norrie right, and so did quite a lot of other people, actually. So Cam Norrie so far is the only correct pick for most people. But yeah, Tom is in the lead. So will anyone be able to beat him? And who out of us is going to get the slam spoon of shame? We've all gone slightly different for Holger Rune, so it depends on how he does.
I know. And Kim, just to add something to the slam spoon of shame, maybe the loser has to eat some escargot.
Oh, that's
as a forfeit.
Right. Holger Rune better make that semi-final then, because that's what I've put, and I do not want to be eating snails.
She should have just stuck to her orange bag of Doritos. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yes, Doritos over snails any day of the week. But well, we'll be back. Well, actually, no, you're not going to be joining us for our next catch up. But Chris will be back. Chris is on a bank holiday today in Denmark.
I know.
They seem to have bank holidays.
Just make it up as they go along, don't they?
Lucky Chris. But he will be back with myself for the next episode. We'll be wrapping up the quarterfinals, so we will see what occurs in the next few days. Sasha Zverev, just breaking news. He is on court with Grigor Dimitrov, and Sasha Zverev is 4-love up. So that match might not be as close as we maybe predicted, but we'll have to see how that gets on. But yeah, we'll be back in a few days' time.
Yes, listeners, I hope you have enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action still to come from the French Open. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email us on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or check out our website tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Wednesday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our quarterfinals French Open catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.